In any case, to follow the rest of the story, the reader needs to know in advance some basic facts of Rome's history, its main chronological divisions, the main sources on which our knowledge of it is based, long-term themes with which we will be concerned, and something of the Romans' prehistory, the Romans' Italian forerunners, and the neighbors whose early influence helped set the direction of Rome's cultural development, the Etruscans and the Greeks. The periods of Roman history. This book follows the usual three-part chronological division of Roman history: monarchy, republic, and empire. It is important to make clear, however, that categorizing Rome's history under these three periods is an anachronistic practice. For the Romans, there was only one significant dividing point in their history: the elimination of the rule of kings at the end of the 6th century BC. After the monarchy was abolished, the Romans themselves never stopped referring to their political system as a republic, res publica, the people's thing, the people's business, even during the period that we call the Empire, which begins at the end of the 1st century BC with the career of Augustus. Today, Augustus is called the first Roman emperor. The Romans, however, refer to him as the princeps, the first man, of the restored and continuing republic. This is the political system that is usually called the Principate. The Romans certainly realized that Augustus's restructuring of the Roman state represented a turning point in their history, but all the emperors, in our terms, who followed him, continued to insist that their government remained the Republic. The three time periods do not receive equal treatment in this book. The history of the monarchy is presented much more briefly than the histories of the Republic and the Empire. This reflects above all the relative lack of reliable evidence for the time of the kings of Rome, although the evidence for the early Republic is hardly much better. The Republic and the Empire, on the other hand, receive roughly equal coverage. Only limited space is devoted to wide-ranging explanations of events and people in ancient Rome, and judgments concerning the significance of Roman history for later times. This does not mean that I do not have strong opinions about these issues, or that I believe the story speaks for itself. Here, my goal is to present the story in such a way that it encourages readers to take on the difficult job of deciding for themselves why the Romans acted and thought as they did, and what meanings to attribute to the history of ancient Rome. In the first of the three customary periods of Rome's political history, a series of 7 kings ruled from 753 to 509 BC, according to the traditionally accepted chronology. These dates are in fact only approximate, like most dates in Roman history, until at least the 3rd century BC, and in many cases for later centuries as well. The Republic, a new system of shared government replacing a sole ruler, extended from 509 to the second half of the 1st century BC. In this overview, the end of the Republic is set in 27 BC, the date when Augustus established the Principate, the government that modern historians call the Roman Empire. The period of the Empire then follows. The last Roman emperor in the western half of the empire, roughly speaking Europe west of Greece, was deposed in AD 476. This date has therefore sometimes been taken to mark the fall of the Roman Empire. However, the narrative here takes the history of the empire roughly a century beyond this fall, reaching the reign of Justinian, AD 527 to 565, in the Eastern Empire. As far as the people of the eastern section of the empire were concerned, Roman imperial government continued for another 1,000 years, with Constantinople as the capital, the emperor's New Rome. The last Eastern emperor was killed in AD 1453, when the Turkish commander Mehmet the Conqueror captured Constantinople, and what little was left of the territory of the Eastern Roman Empire. Historians today call the empire that Mehmet founded the Ottoman Empire. Since the Ottomans took over the remaining territory of the Eastern Roman Empire, this date might qualify as a better choice for the Roman Empire's fall than AD 476. It is worth remembering, however, that Mehmet publicly announced that, as a ruler, he was building on and aiming to outdo the legacies of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian conqueror, Julius Caesar, and